Hello, 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 coaches and leaders. I have an extraordinary guest on with me, Penny Zenker, and she's a focusologist. I'm so excited to hear her talk about that. And she's written an incredible book that just got published and released called The Reset Mindset. I'm like so excited to talk with her about that. And my listeners know that I love talking about mindsets, and this is just another way of naming how we think, right? Thinking about how we think. And so we're gonna be talking about all of that. But before we jump in, I first want to welcome you to the show, Penny.
Thanks for having me here. I'm so excited, Becca.
Yeah, this is great. It's gonna be such a fun conversation.
We can geek
So
out.
yes, oh gosh, I'm such a geek. You will see me. I bubble
Huh.
over with excitement. So I first wanted you to share with everyone what has been your journey in academia. What brought you to study mindsets? I know you studied productivity too. Just share with us what your journey has been that's led you to here.
Yeah. So I think so. What's relevant is like I chose a university that was more of a learning by doing university, and I think that was the basis of sort of my mindset and what grew out of that. So Drexel University was a co-op
Hmm.
school, and
Hmm.
so I went there to school, and then shortly thereafter, I actually started my own IT business. I mean, there's a little bit in between there, but uh, and built that up to a multi-million-dollar business, and I sold it to a public company. And I learned a lot about adaptability in IT as well, because what you read in a book isn't necessarily what actually works. And then yeah, I've coached with Tony Robbins and his customers all around the world to help them to double their business, and been speaking on the speaker circuit for I don't know, more than 6 years now. And it was that marriage between productivity and why aren't people doing the things that I'm telling them to do, and the mindset, which is what's holding them back or enabling them to propel forward. So my worlds kind of just came together like that for me to be focused in that area.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm so excited to hear all about this and kind of dive in. I know the productivity work you've done relates to and connects to the mindset work that you do. So I want to
Absolutely.
jump in here, and I'd love you. So first, actually, before we talk about reset mindset, I'd love you to share what is a focusologist.
Well, I think I came up with it around the pandemic.
Hmm.
While I was looking for a way to see what was that common thread throughout my whole, like, how do I sum up what I'm about? And the word was focus, but not necessarily attention or presence like people think. So when they think of focus, so for me, focus is about aligned action, right? So it's about where intention, attention, and direction meet, and that creates aligned action. But at the same time, I'm like, we are in a focus crisis. Like, we are bombarded with so many things that are distracting us. And even myself, even though that's my common thread of kind of finding what's most important and focusing on that, I'm struggling. I'm still struggling sometimes.
Hmm.
And so I said, we have to become focusologists so that we can relearn and recommit to focus on a daily basis. So
Hmm.
it's not something we can do once. We have to train our brain, like we're talking about mindset, right? We have to train our brain again how to focus, and then to practice it daily, because it's a constant battle against the things that are trying to pull our attention away.
Focus, right? The focus on focus. Really, it makes me think of also being present with people, right? So I
Mhm.
think sometimes we think of focus on the tasks we need to do, but when we're focusing with another human, I would call that being present. Is that would you relate that to being present as well?
Yes, and right. So there's an element of presence, but
Mhm.
there's also an element of, what do I want this relationship to be? So when we're talking about people, is this
Mm.
someone important to me?
Mhm.
How do I so it's more intentional than present,
Intentional.
if
Mhm.
that makes
Got it.
sense,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Hmm.
Because I need to be thinking about how I show up and the words that I use. And it all happens immediately if you're, if you're thinking intentionally about who this person is to you. So that's how I would say it's about presence with intention.
That's I love that. I love a nice little equation there. Being present. And that's, for the coaches and leaders listening, right? That is a super important skill of being intentional in our interactions and in our relationships, right? So I've heard a relationship as the third entity. There's you, there's me, and there's a relationship, right? As like almost a third
Mhm.
entity that we need to be intentionally building, creating, growing. And so I love that. These are such important skills as coaches and leaders to be
Totally.
present with people. This is, and this is that human-centered piece of coaching versus task-centered. We're not little taskmasters just checking off boxes and getting things done. We're humans
Yeah,
interacting with other humans.
absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So I want to hear about reset mindset. What is it? How what just tell us all about
Well,
it.
I think one of the best ways to understand it is also to compare it,
Mhm,
right? Because I kind of talk about the reset mindset as the new generation of the growth mindset, the next generation.
mhm,
So
mhm,
for people who don't know what growth mindset is, Carol Dweck in I think it was 2006, she wrote the book Mindset, which really brought people to understand how much mindset played a role in our success.
mhm,
And she talked about fixed mindset, which is kind of sticking to what you know and you don't have any control over what happens in your life. And then the growth mindset, which is about a foundation of learning and growing. And that if I put effort and persistence in, I can learn and grow, and that will create growth. Whereas a fixed mindset is kind of stagnant.
mhm,
And we also need to know that we can flip back and forth between those, right? We can be in a growth mindset and then we get really successful and then we get afraid and then we go into a fixed mindset, right? So it's not everything is dynamic. And that's where the reset mindset comes in, is that it's about being even more dynamic. It's not learning and growing over time because we live in a world that's constantly changing and uncertain. And how do we deal with that?
mhm,
When we come from the growth mindset and we focus on effort and persistence, it burns us out.
mhm,
And that's why we find ourselves, even if we're positive, growth oriented people, we find ourselves burning out. It's because that isn't enough. That isn't the way we need to function in today's world. In today's world, we need to have dynamic reassessment where we're constantly reassessing how we're showing up, how things are changing around us, what's necessary in the moment for the situation, for, the globalization or for the community, whatever it is that we're focused on. And it's grounded not in learning and growth, but it's grounded in value creation, so
mm,
that we're constantly looking at the greater good, the thing that we're really working towards. And like you said, if we're talking about people and relationships, that's why I said it comes down to what is important about this relationship.
mhm,
If you're a coach, you need to also know you're not a friend. You have a
mhm,
different intention in the way that you listen. And you need to be dynamic in knowing when you need to uh, push back or challenge somebody, and when they're ready for that, right? To
mhm,
be in that ready role
mhm.
in that context. So it's about value creation and dynamic reassessment. So that's sort of at a high level, and then I can talk about the components, but I want to hear what that means to you.
Yeah, yeah. So some things I hear, and I'm kind of mapping this onto the work that I do around intentionality, around what people are committed to. So when you say value creation, it makes me think of the commitment work that I do, which is what, folks really understanding what they are authentically committed to in a relationship, in a dynamic or an interaction, right? In this interaction, I'm really committed to you being empowered to whatever, take action on this thing in your classroom. And so I think about that, right? And
Mhm.
so let me just ask you, is it about it is intentionality and like is that value creation? Is it identifying what folks are committed to?
Absolutely. It is grounded in intentionality.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, because when you've decided what's most important, what's the greater goal or the value that you're creating or finding, um, you're then able to align around that intentionality, right?
mhm,
So
mhm,
it's kind of where intentionality and actions meet, right?
mhm,
Or
mhm.
how you
Yeah,
show up, right?
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I read a research study recently. I don't remember where I read it, but I read this research study where they had a bunch of people. It was like an ineffective team, a team that was not working well, and all they did, the only intervention was they had them write down before their meeting what their goal was in the meeting. They didn't share the goal. All they did was write down their goal. That was it.
uh-huh.
And then they went to the meeting, and the meeting started to become much more effective because people simply became aware, right?
Hmm.
And aware of their intentions. It's not in the background, it's not some accidental thing. It was like in their forefront. And they had the opportunity when they wrote it down to be at least aware, if not intentional, about what their goal was. And I just think how powerful that is for teams working together, for people coaching other people to know and be aware, what are my intentions here?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it creates directed focus, right?
Mhm,
Aligned
mhm,
focus for them around what their goal is and what they should be focusing on, discussing how they should show up and that kind
mhm,
of thing. And of course, if the whole group were to discuss and be clear on a single goal,
mhm,
they'd be that much more aligned in their focus and the way that they work through the meeting. And they could block out things that aren't necessary for that
mhm,
meeting and
mhm.
really stay attentive to the things that are.
I love it. This is great. So I want to hear more about reset mindset. What is the reset part of the reset mindset? What gets resetted?
Well, first of all, it's a common language, right? Which is
Mhm,
really important when we're sharing it. And of course,
mhm,
it gives you a language to call upon it, to activate it, to access it. Like you said, that awareness. So just having that word and the reset happens in what I call a reset moment. So again, when we declare it as such, and then we are going to activate sort of everything that comes along with a reset moment. And because a lot of times we think of reset moments as these big shifts in our lives, like, oh, I just lost my job or I had a baby, right? This is a reset moment, like my life is changing. But they're present every single day in those smaller moments when we just can take a purposeful pause. And I say that together, purposeful pause. Again, it's that intentionality is it's not just taking a pause and I think I'll flip through and watch a few cat videos. Mm, right?
mhm,
But if it's intentional and you're listening to some music and that's going to change your energy, or you're going to take some essential oils and smell that, or go for a walk, or so that you can recharge or re-energize. Um, but it could also be to rethink something, to challenge yourself,
mhm,
uh, to look for creativity, to get unstuck, right? You can do a lot in that purposeful pause. And like you talk about when you talk about interacting with each other, right? That
mhm,
humanity
mhm,
piece of things,
mhm.
that purposeful pause to say, what's needed here?
Yeah.
How can
Yeah.
I support this person in a way that makes them feel safe? Or, right? But sometimes we have to stop and pause because our first reaction might be to say something that isn't helpful.
Mhm.
um,
Right.
or design, right? So
Mhm.
sometimes it's just like, okay, what's called for right now before I taking that reaction and calling it back and being able to respond versus react.
Mhm. It makes me think of when I love growth mindset, and I've actually worked alongside Carol Dweck's coworkers, the
Oh,
researcher. So
awesome.
Lisa Blackwell, like I there's the other. So I worked with a company she co-founded, but had to separate from because of the integrity piece with being a researcher. It's called Mindset Works. And so I did some work with them. And so I worked alongside her psychologist coworkers. And so I'm really a deep believer in understanding what growth mindset is and isn't authentically. And I think schools generally know what growth mindset is, American schools at least. But sometimes it gets reduced to bulletin boards and cute little coloring sheets. And I'm like, nope,
Right.
none of that is a mindset. It's cute, but not a mindset. Um, and so one thing that I don't think gets talked about enough is when we are operating under, how do I say this? My experience of operating under a growth mindset, we can even have mixed mindsets, right? It's more of a continuum than a yes or no. So growth mindset or fixed mindset, we can get dysregulated. I can get dysregulated, right? So here I am, I'm working hard on something. I believe that I can get better with effort, and yet it's frustrating, right? And and I can get dysregulated, right? And I think your reset mindset, right? The opportunity to stop and pause, that operating under a growth mindset isn't I just keep going, right?
Right.
It's I can operate on a growth mindset, get dysregulated because what I'm doing is feels frustrating or upsetting. I can pause, reset with, all these different strategies, and
Yes.
then keep going, right? That's actually supporting my mindsets.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the more you do it, so I suggest, right, you take more of these reset moments because then now you're dynamically reassessing and right and you're enabling yourself that dynamic learn as you go, learn now, real time and adapt versus wait until this project is over and learn over time, right? We need to learn in the moment. How do I need to change the way that I'm looking at this and approaching this because it's not working and I can continue like this until it's done and burn myself out. So it's recognizing the need to change. So and I'm interested in your thoughts on I didn't necessarily study with the people who talked about that. So, your thoughts on this would be appreciated. Before we go there, I also just want to add this piece that when you have that reset moment, it triggers intuitively a meta model of thinking, mental model of thinking, which is to step back, to get perspective and realign. So those are the three steps that intuitively come along when we purposefully call upon a reset.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
there can be many strategies that you use to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And something you mentioned something earlier that I really wanted to highlight, which was you said, we could be operating under a growth mindset and achieve all these things and then reach a place. And then at that place, and sometimes so something that happens in schools is called the
Mhm.
Peter principle. Do you know the Peter principle?
Mhm.
Right? So folks get essentially promoted out of their skill set. And this is what happens in schools. A lot of you have gotten roles. You're an excellent teacher of children. You got a role where now you're working with adults and are not necessarily trained and supported to do that, right? Your master skill set wasn't in adult learning,
Right.
right? And so and I found this too, that I'll operate under a growth mindset, get myself to a certain level, and then sit there comfortably. I don't know what to say and be like, I did great. I am good at this. Fixed
Uh-huh.
mindset. Right?
Right.
And it
Yeah.
sneaks up on you. It
Yeah.
sneaks up on you, and you're like, "Oh, man, I think I'm great." And so the way I can start to notice, "Ooh, I'm operating under a fixed mindset," and this very thing that a growth mindset got me here, right? Is if I get defensive.
Mhm.
If I get
Mhm.
defensive in some way, I'm like, "Oh, there's probably a fixed mindset around here." If I'm getting defensive in some way.
Yeah, that's a great point. That would be like one of the signals that I
Mhm,
say that are to be aware of for a reset moment, right?
mhm.
Defensiveness, excuses, complaining, any of those things. If you recognize them and you become that professional noticer, now you're going to be like, "Uh-huh, okay, I need to just take a moment and reflect what's really going on here."
I love that. So you said a couple things. You said we need to identify the signals for when we're operating under a fixed mindset or just a generally unhelpful mindset here.
Mhm.
And we I love this term, and I'm going to use it. We need to become professional noticers. This is great. This is totally aligned with my work because that is often the first step to shifting our own thinking and beliefs, right? And that
Absolutely.
one of the most I did a keynote. I was a closing keynote speaker at a conference a few days ago, and one of the things I talk about is should, the word should, and we often think it to ourselves, I should do this, I shouldn't do this, and we think about other people, they shouldn't do that. And it really is a word that promotes resistance in ourselves and other
Hmm.
people. And the first step to stop with our shoulds is to notice. That's the first step. Oh, I noticed I had a should about them. Right. And then we can take other actions, but we can't do anything. We cannot shift our beliefs if we don't notice it first.
Absolutely. I mean, that's awareness is absolutely the first step. So if we can't, we have to become professional noticers in
Mhm,
order to want to, that's curiosity. Like what I wrote down here or thought about when you said, I am good at this, right? Is that you stop being curious, you stop exploring. And the
mhm,
whole idea of the reset mindset is you're always reinventing and exploring. Like that is the nature of your ready state
mhm,
is I'm going to be curious here. You walk into a meeting, a negotiation, right? You don't walk in thinking you're going to be defeated. You walk in curious how we can make this a win-win, right? And that
mhm.
kind of thing.
And I think about curiosity versus judgment, something that again we can think about as a sign of where our mindset is, right? If I am authentically curious about someone or something, uh, probably in some kind of growth mindset or somewhere in the realm of that, right? If I go into judgment, probably off operating somewhere with a fixed mindset, defending myself, defending something that I'm considering fixed, and I have to judge this other thing to make me feel better, right? And that's great. I really love like this thinking that you have around like the signals, right? How can we look for the signs of where our mindset is?
Yeah. Yeah. So what do the nuances mean to you? Like of the different, like this is a new concept for you, right? You hadn't heard of this before. And so how do you think that that fits in
Mhm.
to the way that people are approaching the future of work, the future of education, right? How important is it and how do you see them utilizing this?
So when I think about okay, let me talk about kind of different chunks of people in schools, right? The
Right.
human, there's the big humans, there's the little humans. So we got the big humans, right? They're I don't know why I keep thinking about dysregulation and the opportunity that reset mindset helps for it, right? But like when humans are interacting with other humans and really pushing the thinking of other humans, right? And we are addressing limiting beliefs, right? So I know the folks listening, I know you have a teacher that doesn't think the kids can do it. I know you
Hmm.
all do, right? And that is a limiting belief. And a lot of times people that I work with don't know what to do with that. And so when we are helping someone shift their beliefs, and there's lots of different ways of doing that, sometimes it's experiencing something new and reflecting on it. We can experience cognitive dissonance, and we a lot of time that's a lot of times that these kids can't do it is operating under a fixed mindset. And when we are
Totally.
shifting mindsets, well, first of all, if we're operating under a fixed mindset and something is coming against it, that's bucking up against it, people will get dysregulated. It's dysregulating, right? And the opportunity for this reset mindset to note to for us to first of all to teach our educators, well, hold on. Us leaders and coaches, we got to do the work first for us to be able to master our own reset mindset, right? Ooh, I'm getting dysregulated, or ooh, I'm operating under a fixed mindset and I see myself getting defensive. I can stop and I'm going to practice this so I can get really good at it, right?
Hmm.
And then the opportunity to teach our teachers to do that too, right? to like, okay, now, and we never teach our teachers to do something we haven't done first. And then the opportunity to teach children, well, as we're teaching them authentically to operate under a growth mindset, which is literally the neurons. What is a mindset? It's a belief. It is the neurons connecting together. What wires together fires together, right? So
Right.
it's and that can be hard, right? I've watched these videos of neurons connecting, and they are working very hard. They're flashing. Have you seen these videos
No,
of
no,
them
I
of them
haven't.
connecting? They're flashing and they're working really hard and they're working, oh, and then they finally pop, they connect. And it's wild to watch. And so when we if we're doing that, right, and we're kind of bumping up against folks' beliefs, normalizing pausing and stepping back to reset with strategies. I'd love to hear
Hmm.
some reset strategies from you.
Hmm.
Um, can be a game changer because then we're not stuck in struggle or a meltdown,
Right.
right? Or avoidance, fight or flight. Adults can have adult looking meltdowns, right?
Oh yeah. Sometimes they look like children meltdowns.
Yeah, sometimes. And sometimes it looks like I'm not talking to you for a month. Still a meltdown. So I would love to hear what are some strategies when folks pause, right? Okay, I notice I need a reset. What are some strategies people can use to reset?
Well, give me some context because I think first, what's important to say is that we all have strategies to reset. We've done this before. It's not like we haven't done it. I mean, if we look back, we could probably see a half a dozen things that we use or we have used in the past, but we forget them, right? We delete, distort, and generalize things. So all of a sudden, we're in this pressure situation and we haven't done it for a while, or we do it in a different context. We'll be okay at home but not at work when that situation comes up, so we can revisit some of the strategies we already have that we know that work.
Mm,
So that's important to say. It's not like you're starting from scratch. You already have
mhm,
these things, right? And it might be
mhm,
like, I know some people when they get up in the morning to start their day and start with, that to prime themselves for the day, they
mhm,
might read scriptures, they might do yoga, and stretching. Or for many, many years, I've switched my practice a little bit, but I practice gratitude. I would write down what I'm grateful for every single morning for, more than 10 years. And that
mhm,
would prime my day. That is
mhm.
also a reset. It's an intentional way to set up your energy. And so, but maybe give me some context and we can talk about different ones and
Oh, I
different.
would love this. Okay, good. So, let like a context where a coach is talking to a teacher and the teacher is resisting the change. So that maybe they're saying, "Oh, that won't work for my kids," right? So that maybe the coach is saying, "Well, we have this new way of teaching reading, and I need you to teach reading this way." And the teacher says, "Nope, that won't work for my kids."
Okay.
And the coach gets maybe flustered and right, the coach might have a thought like, oh, I'm good at this, I was good at teaching children. And I've had coaches like
Right.
question
People
whether
always listen to me. Why
yeah,
is this
people
person
listen to
listening
me
to
then.
me?
I'm not good at this anymore, right? So it might be I'm not good at this fixed mindset, or it might be,
Right.
well, I am good at this, right? And this person is
Right.
wrong
There's
for saying,
something
right? So
wrong
there might
with
be
them.
blame. But
Yeah.
no matter what, there's some version of dysregulation,
Right.
right? So there they
So
are.
So
Yeah.
here's what I would say for that. Like the first things that pop to my mind is often a cue
Mhm,
word is
mhm,
very helpful. It can't be complicated because you just got hit by something where you were initially flustered. So you recognize the fluster and you practice going, interesting, tell me more,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
So leave it up to the other person to explore why this isn't possible, and and be specific. Well, specifically, where do you think the challenges are? Because sometimes we chunk things up to this won't work,
mhm,
and then when we help them chunk it down into specifics,
mhm,
we start to hear that there's only one thing, there's one bottleneck or one issue, and actually that's solvable now that we know exactly what it is.
mhm,
So, but the first thing is you've been triggered, is to recognize that okay, I feel like I want to fight back, or, is to take a breath and say, interesting, tell me more.
Mhm. That's great. And it makes me think of like in the moment where you're, oh, right, the oh crap moment. um, to be prepared, right? To say, okay, if I'm gonna have this moment, right? If a teacher is gonna push back, like I'm gonna be ready. Like I may not know when I'm in the moment what to say, but I can be ready and practiced with a phrase like, tell me more. Can you say more about that? Right?
Yeah.
So my brain may be going a mile a minute and I'm frazzled, but I can pause and help to reset myself and give me a little bit of time to say, tell me more about that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And in the pause, I think it's
Mhm.
important that you say interesting first, or that you need to, that word is handling and shifting your perspective, because you're
Mm,
not curious in the moment. So what
yes.
interesting is a
Interesting.
curious word. It has
Yeah.
that curious energy. And so it's going to shift your perspective. And if you can have a single word
Mhm,
like reset, yeah, you
mhm,
might say, reset. But that's not appropriate for that situation. I think something like interesting would get you into your curiosity, and that way the next words out of your mouth are going to have the right tone.
mhm,
Because maybe if you just say tell me more first,
mhm. It
you
could
the
be
tone
it
might be "T- tell me more."
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it might be like annoyed,
Mhm.
or and that person is going to feel that energy. So
Yeah.
it's important that you shift your energy first,
Mhm, mhm.
and then you ask the question.
Yeah. I
And
love
that's
that.
that's that that's that reset moment that allows you to shift your perspective in there. And then you're creating a reset moment for someone else by saying, tell me more, so that you can help to coach them.
Mhm,
But something I think is interesting, sometimes, I mean, we're human. Maybe you're not ready and something happens, and it happened, and you responded the not a great way, and you got not a great response, and it
mhm,
didn't, it happens. But the professional noticer won't always notice it before it's happening. So the way that we build a reset mindset is
mhm,
that we notice it afterwards and go, ooh, we take that reset moment afterwards and we
mhm,
reflect on it. We say, ooh, that wasn't so good. What could I have done differently?
mhm,
Oh, I forgot to say interesting. And okay. But what happens is, as you start to reflect and notice them afterwards, you're going to start to reflect in after you said it. So maybe something will come out of your mouth and you'll say, hold on a second, let me rephrase that.
mhm,
Right? I'm noticing it in the moment. And
mhm,
then as you continue to practice it, right, those neurons are, like you said, doop,
mhm,
coming together. Then you're going to notice it before it actually comes out of your mouth. And then you're going to be able to access the interesting, because it takes time to build a reset mindset, to have these reset practices where it's just the way that you think.
mhm.
It doesn't happen overnight.
And this goes, I want to name this because some of my beautiful coaches and leaders that you're listening, you love yourself a good protocol. And I know. I love like tell me what to say. That's what I always get. Tell me what to say. And I'm like, look, it doesn't matter if I tell you what to say if your way of being isn't authentic and aligned with the words you're saying. If you're still judging them and saying, tell me more, it doesn't matter that you're saying, tell me more.
Right.
Right. And so I really love that reset mindset really embraces and supports authenticity
Mhm.
and folks showing up in a way that promotes like our openness from ourself, openness from other people, and acknowledges that our energy, our vibe, I don't know what else to call it, our way of being is tr- transmittable. Like it communicates
Oh, energy is
often.
contagious.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
it communicates louder than our words. And so that's why I often don't give people the words, because it doesn't matter if your way of being doesn't communicate the same thing.
I agree with that. And I would say some words, uh, like if they were to say interesting or reset, some words have an energy that actually may shift your energy.
Okay. Okay.
Like I do believe that words have energy, and that they can
Mhm.
support you in
Yeah.
in the path.
Yeah. 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 And I yes. That's okay, interesting. Yeah, I think I say interesting a lot because I truly am interested a lot. Um, yeah, I think that's great being equipped with words that shift our energy. And I think it sounds like, and you think this way too, like it can kind of be unique to folks, right? Like interesting might be a great word for me. It might not be a natural energy shifter for someone else, right? For
Totally.
people to find, like, to read your book and find the ways for them to shift their energy. And when so actually it makes me think about, I want to name this thing because I have some friends that are really wonderful. If I am upset and I'm sharing something with them, not upset at them, but upset and sharing, I'm like in the upset, right? And I have a handful of friends that will chuckle when I'm telling them this, like chuckle. And it kind of makes me stop. Like, wow, I was upset. And they're being lighthearted about this. And it's not upsetting at all. And I'm like you think this is kind of humorous, right? And it totally shifts how I see myself in the situation, how I see other
Sure.
people in the situation. And it makes me think just like that reset mindset, right? They have this ability to bring lightheartedness around something that feels so heavy and significant to me.
Well, they're breaking your pattern. There's a lot of
Mhm.
different ways you're experiencing a pattern of emotion,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
them chuckling breaks it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now, it can also aggravate some people if people are
Mhm.
chuckling
Yeah.
and don't think that it's serious. So,
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
could be other ways to break the pattern too.
Yeah. Oh,
They could just break into coughing, and that might just break somebody's pattern. Like, are you okay? Oh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, I'm fine. Thanks.
Yeah.
That could break somebody's pattern too, right?
Yeah.
That's also some behavioral psychology tricks
For
to
sure.
get somebody a glass of water. Hey, are you okay? Are you thirsty?
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
if they're getting super emotional and they can't even get it out, um, that's a great strategy. It's just break that
Mhm.
pattern of emotion. It's like
Ooh, I
taking
love that.
a
Mhm.
CD
Mhm.
and scratching it, right? Eventually it
Mhm.
won't play anymore. So if you break
Right.
it, you break it, and you break it, then
Yeah, breaking that pattern. Yeah. That's really great. Like I really and it's something that I do intuitively and I teach other people to do, but sometimes what I find is when I'm intuitively good at something, it can be a little tougher for me to train other folks. And I have to work very hard to be like, what
what am
do
I
I do
doing?
when what am I doing and why am I doing it, right? So I can break it down for folks. And what I find a lot when I'm in schools is my coaches and leaders tend to be very logical. And so when they have someone that's experiencing resistance or upset in some way, they will meet them with logic. And that is often not not the thing that is needed because they're like, I'm being professional. I'm saying, and I'm like, hold on, that's not actually getting you the outcome that you want. And what you're saying is we want to do something that actually disrupts this. It is disrupt, not the word. I don't know.
No, you can say
Yeah.
disrupt. Yeah, disrupts the pattern. The reason I went is it made me think about that I think that you can kind of be logical and use a
Mm-hmm.
protocol, because I was thinking of, well, if you walk them through the 3 steps, hey, let's step back for a second and let's
Uh-huh.
get some perspective on this issue, right? That's it's kind of not emotional per se, right? It's just
Yeah.
like let's step back. Let's take a deep breath and just step back and analyze this.
Uh-huh.
Or not analyze the wrong word, right? Is it, see what we're experiencing and where these emotions are coming from. Now
Mm-hmm.
let's get some perspective and see what led to this. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think you can approach it with a
Mm-hmm.
process or that kind of thing.
Mm.
Because that will this
Interesting.
I think
Okay.
there's a lot of different I think that's the beauty of it, is there's
Yeah.
not one way to reset or one
Yeah.
way. There are so many different ways. And when I was doing a lot of coaching and behavioral therapy kinds of things, uh you find what works for one person doesn't work for someone else. I'm sure you have the same thing. You're
Mm-hmm.
not going to coach two people exactly the same way.
Right.
So this is the same for teachers working with children, or working with your staff, is finding out what motivates them, and uh, finding out what triggers them, or them
Mm-hmm.
finding out what triggers them, right? And
Mm-hmm.
just that again, that's the beauty of the reset mindset, is that you
Mhm,
dance with it. It's like,
mhm,
okay, that didn't work. Let's try something else.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I've used the analogy in the past of bumper cars, like where I use it as a verb, bumper car-ing. So where, instead of I smash into the wall, I'm not just stuck there, which is often what we kind of it's like, well, it didn't work. It's like, oh, I actually just ricochet. I hit the wall and I either go right or left, but I'm still moving. I'm still in
Mhm.
motion, right? And I think reset
Mhm.
mindset really helps us stay in motion. Well, that didn't work. What else am I gonna do?
Exactly. Yeah. Stay thoughtfully in motion, like
Yeah,
intentionally
thoughtfully.
in motion,
Yes.
right?
Yes, yes,
And I
yes,
think that
yes.
that is it. You're not just kind of bouncing all over the place. You actually have a reverse
Yeah.
in most of those cars. When you do hit someone, you could ricochet off, but then you can also reverse and use your
Yeah.
steering wheel, right? Which is
Yeah.
your intentionality.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. So you wrote your previous book was called The Productivity Zone. And I would just love to hear a little bit. What does reset mindset, how does that relate and connect to your work around productivity?
Well, I think it's a simpler version
Hmm.
of what I talked about with the productivity zone. And the productivity zone was a framework to show us that there's 10 core drivers that
Mm.
help us to reset ourselves around what's most important and
Hmm.
how to block out the distractions and get ourselves out of self-sabotage, which is perfectionism and procrastination kind of thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's a reset practice in itself. And by using a framework, any framework, I use this framework, but if you take any framework, it's a reset practice because it makes you
Hmm.
step back and it gives you a structured approach of looking at, how do I fill these buckets? What do I look at first? What do I look at next? And it walks you through a structured process so that you can reevaluate and then you can decide what your next best steps are, whether it's a SWOT analysis or any other type of framework. So
Hmm.
mine just did that around how to focus on what matters most and the different drivers of mindset, of strategy, and of sustainability that'll help you get there and stay there.
That's
And
really great. Really naming a framework, like even a reflective framework to say, okay, right, I need a reset here. Let me step back. Let me use a framework to guide me in a way of thinking about something differently,
yeah,
right? That's really great. Okay. All right. This has been such a fun conversation. Is there anything you'd like to share with the audience that we haven't been able to kind of talk through around reset mindset that you think would be really helpful for them and their ability to support educators?
I just think that, I'm trying to think because I had a number of situations with my son at school. He got into a little reputation as a troublemaker and he couldn't get out of it because nobody would give him a chance. Like they always assumed it was him. He got in trouble for everything. One time he got in trouble and we found out because I was like, "Well, did you ask him what happened?" They're like, "No." Um, and then we found out he wasn't even in the room.
Mhm,
So it wasn't even possible that he was involved in that.
mhm,
So I think as educators, and I know there's a lot of stress, on educators. And believe me, if I had to have students that I had to take care of all day and that many, I would probably pull my hair out. So it's a difficult situation. So it's really just to make more reset moments, proactive ones, right? Don't just wait for the reactive ones because that's not going to be as supportive as giving yourself space throughout the day to find that reset, to when something happens, challenge assumptions, make sure you use your questions. The same things we would want to do with kids, use your words, ask your questions, give people the benefit of the doubt. There are a series that I talk about in the book. There are some beliefs that come with a reset mindset. Because to me, a mindset is a cluster of beliefs. It's not just
mhm,
one belief, right? It's a
mhm, mhm,
cluster of beliefs that create a fixed mindset or a
mhm,
cluster that allow you to live into a growth mindset. So give people the benefit of the doubt.
mhm.
Uh, it's feedback, isn't failure. So when you get any feedback, right, is something that you can work with and adapt to. So it's not a failure if you're getting feedback, but you have to put it into practice. And so it's just cultivate those beliefs that support you to be intentional and curious and those ways of being,
Mhm.
and then you'll be ready for anything, right? If you're
Mhm.
in those ways of being and authentic in that, then you'll be ready for whatever comes, and you'll be able to handle it with uh, effective and efficient manner.
I love it. Yeah, and I just see when you said feedback is failure, it make I
Feedback
just
isn't failure.
isn't sorry, feedback isn't failure. That's what I meant to say. That's funny. Um, I know a number of my listeners are dealing with perfectionism,
I'm
and
a recovering perfectionist
yes,
right
I'm a
there,
recovering
baby.
perfectionist. Yeah, and so feedback can feel personal and hurt,
Mm,
like critical feedback, right? And it's like we know we're not supposed to. It's not supposed to be personal, right? There's the logic, and then there's like, oh, this is actually my reaction right now, and I see the reset mindset as an opportunity as we are growing our ability to have feedback not be failure, right? To say, okay, I received critical feedback. I'm having a reaction. I'm going to step back. I'm going to use my strategies to reset, and I'm going to grow my neural patterns to see this as an opportunity for growth over and over again. So it's less and less ouchy
yeah.
every time.
And they can say one thing when they get
Mhm.
feedback. Again,
Mhm.
it's how did we simplify it? What one thing
Yeah.
can you ask yourself or say?
Mhm.
Thank you.
Mm. Yeah.
Because it's hard to be, if you just thank you. Like you don't want to say it, but if you remember, it shifts the whole energy. Thank you.
Yes, it
Thank you for
does.
that feedback.
Yeah, that's really great. I
I
love
just
that.
got some
Thank you.
difficult feedback today. Is and I was like, I guess, I now live in that place of the reset mindset. I'm certainly challenged. I'm human.
Mhm.
But when I heard it, I was like, well, thank you. I appreciate you sharing that with me because my intention is to create value and to deliver the best service that I can. And if I missed somewhere, I'm so
Mhm.
glad to know it because then I can make sure that it doesn't happen again for you or for someone else, right? It
Mhm.
leads us to, well, let's put it this way. That perfectionist inside of us wants that feedback
Mhm.
because I can't do as good a job as I want to do if I don't get that kind of feedback. So in a way, we could, if that makes us feel better, right? We could
Mhm.
say, okay, well, that is important in order for us
Mhm.
to deliver the best service.
Yeah, yeah, we just don't want it to result in shame and blame, which is a side effect of perfectionism versus healthy striving, right? Which is
Mm,
actually the thing that our goal is to become. So,
yeah.
thank you so much. Your book is newly out, The Reset Mindset. We're gonna put the links in the show notes for all the things. And Penny, is there a easy way for folks to find you if they're interested in knowing more about you, your speaking, your coaching, all of that?
Definitely. They can go to the resetmindset.net. That's where they can find out more about the book. And that's connected to my website, which is pennyzenker360.com.
Okay, perfect. We'll put all those links in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your expertise with us. This has
That was
been
fun.
fantastic.
Yeah, it was really fun. Thanks, Becca.